People were worried. I mean, it was scary, and people were afraid to use their boats, go in the water. They were afraid for their dogs to be next to the water. The water, they made it sound as if the entire lake was green, and also as if it were just a Lake Hopatcong problem.
And if you go out on the lake, as of today, there's very few people that are actually even boating.
This harmful algal bloom is unprecedented. We've had algae blooms before. I mean, a lot of times it would be late in the season and not at this level that we're seeing today. This being as widespread as it is and affecting as many people as it is, to the point that the state is issuing this advisory. We've never seen that before.
This really quotes New York, Pennsylvania, every lake. Find some funding if possible.
Usually on a weekend, we have a number of customers that come in bathing suits. They're getting ice, they're getting sandwiches for the boat. They're excited to go out. This year, I've seen one come in, and that person didn't realize there was a problem on the lake. They were going with friends. They aren't inviting their families up, or their families aren't coming up to spend weekends, summers, vacations with them. They're going to Lake George, they're going to other places, so it definitely has affected us. If it comes back next year again, what can I say? We'll have to address that problem and see what we can do to make up for it. I'm not sure how.
The advisory was put in place because a number of people reported harmful algal blooms in front of their docks or at their beaches. There are regular checks on all beaches, on all bathing beaches anyway, water quality tests. So the combination of the DEP getting these reports and these tests from the beaches coming back with high levels of cyanobacteria led the state to end up issuing an advisory for the entire lake.
And keep in mind, it's an advisory, so it's not a ban or it's not a law. So it's a recommendation. I think what's making it problematic at Lake Hopatcong is there's no distinct pattern of seeing elevated blue-green algae cells in one part of the lake and not in another. So if the water looks fine, I could see an individual going, well, I'm going in the water. For most of the cyanotoxins to really have an impact, you have to ingest them. But some of them are also dermatoxins, and some people are more sensitive to blue-green algae than others. So it is an advisory, and it's definitely something that people should take seriously.
Initially what happened was the messaging that went out through a lot of the media outlets was really more of misinformation. The advisory said basically that there wasn't to be any contact with the water in Lake Hopatcong. And some of the media outlets took that as a ban on swimming, boating, kayaking, jet skiing. And so that initial messaging that went out really scared a lot of people off the lake.
I cannot believe they would do this and cripple this area. Within 4 days, we must have had half our camps canceled. And then they started to realize, wow, people are still going in. We have guys in that literally ride every single day in this water, and they have never had a rash, never had a problem.
People still boated all summer. People are still swimming. There were just wave runners going by, and it's just frustrating dealing with that.
It's a big, fat waste of money and a waste of time.
It's really, really horrible for the businesses around the lake, what's been going on, especially the timing of it. And I know there are people who look out at the lake in front of them and it doesn't look like the pea soup that you see in pictures, and you think, well, how bad could it be? Or I went in and I'm fine. I mean, we have heard from people who have had rashes and they had a cut, their cut got infected if they went in. It's not, it's hard to know. It's really all anecdotal. You have people on both ends of the spectrum saying that it's an overreaction and people should just be out swimming, and then other people saying you're not reacting enough and it should be, we should close the entire lake. And the truth lies somewhere in between, but I don't know where.
I don't see how it's hysterical to want to make sure that people are safe. And I think that that's what the state of New Jersey is doing here. We have standards in the state for water quality. They're protective. They're a little on the conservative side, intentionally so, and rightfully so, because what we all collectively are trying to do is try to protect the the citizens of the state of New Jersey. And not every person is the same. Some people, like kids, older people, people with immune system issues, are much more susceptible to getting sick.
To me, there's two separate issues. We have a human health issue and we have an environmental issue. And I think people are starting to kind of muddle the two together and say, well, I was swimming yesterday, so everything's fine. That's one issue. And if you feel like you're comfortable with swimming, I can understand that. But it doesn't change the fact that there's still an environmental issue. And this is really just a wake-up call from the environment, from the lake, saying, I'm out of balance, I need some help with my inputs.
There are a number of factors that contribute to the development of such blooms. Part of it was the weather, particularly in June, that in the region, in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, we were really experiencing a combination of these short, intense storms that would last like 30, 40 minutes, followed by a day and a half of sunny weather. And then after that, we had a mini heat wave. Those conditions combined with elevated phosphorus concentrations coming in from the watershed is really what triggered the blooms.
If it's warmer water temperatures you're looking at for a longer period of the season, we're seeing the area warm by several degrees Fahrenheit. And with that, you might be able to foster the development and prolong the lifespan of these algal blooms. There, the weather may be having some impact with more abundant runoff from the increases in precipitation.
I'm just hoping that the bloom dissipates soon. I know DEP is taking it very seriously. They're monitoring twice a week. They monitor on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
No, he did not at all address this issue. None of the questions that were forwarded were answered. But he had a saying.
People can kind of evaluate their own nutrient footprint, and that includes if you have a septic, making sure it's been properly pumped out and maintained. If you fertilize your lawn, you either don't fertilize it anymore or you make sure you're using or your landscape service is using phosphorus-free fertilizer. You clean up after your pets, or if you live right on the lake, you can plant a riparian buffer with native plants that will help absorb nutrients before they get in the lake. The more you can rally the people around you and your community to do the same, the better effect we'll have on the lake.
I'm on the Lake Apacon Commission, so one of the ways that local governments can really help, and we've really worked well together because of the commission. We have Roxbury, Mount Arlington, Apacon, Jefferson, all have representatives on the Lake Apacon Commission. I'm actually an alternate commissioner for the County of Morris. We're really in, I would say, a constant communication. One of the big issues has been is that the commission was formed back in 2000. Even at that time, it wasn't funded well, and when the commission was formed and it was put under the DEP, the initial startup for the commission was $3 million, and then it would be $1.5 million for operating costs thereout. And then a few years after, all the funding dried up, so there's really no money going into the commission. You really have a small little budget for weed control. And even that was taken away and put into the state parks budget for them to manage the weed harvesting. So what really has to happen is that the state has to properly fund the commission.
I think that the state of New Jersey has tried, legislators have tried to put more money in the kitty, per se, to do all the things that we need to do for the lake. The most we could get out of the state was $500,000. Does that bother me? It seriously bothers me when I know this year, and if you go back and look at budgets, but in this year in particular, I brought it up for discussion at appropriations, that the state of New Jersey allocated $4 million for wildwood tourism. $4 million a year would keep this lake clean, and it would be able to support and be there for the communities, to swim, businesses to thrive, and be assured that that's going to happen. I think the state has to step up. I think the state needs to fund more money for this.
We're seeing the impacts of climate change all around us. It's in our news when we're reading about wildfires and we're reading about extreme flooding and people being displaced and migration. And it's local as well. My backyard is consistently flooded. That hasn't been the case before. We're seeing heat waves that are requesting advisories now of the public where we're supposed to be extremely careful if we have asthma or breathing issues. We're seeing intense flooding, more intense storms, and now we're seeing these harmful algal blooms, not just in Lake Apacon, but in Greenwood Lake and in other lakes around other states. So climate change isn't just a Sunday issue. It's not something that we kick the can down the road and look at 2030. It's something that's impacting our local communities.
Climate change is a growing interest and impacts on New Jersey. We're seeing temperatures warm. We've seen them warm several degrees Fahrenheit over the last century. It's a physical principle that a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. For about every almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit of warming, you can hold about 7% more moisture in the atmosphere. That doesn't mean it rains down all the time, but when you have a trigger to squeeze that moisture out of the atmosphere, there's going to be more moisture there to remove.
We are seeing an increase in not so much a change in the amount that it rains, but when and how much it rains at any one given time. It doesn't rain like it used to. It rains a lot, and it doesn't rain at all. So you're seeing things like drought periods or months without any rain at all. The trends when it comes to our measurement of temperature are very definitive. We've certainly seen shifts in the temperature, and we're expecting that to continue to increase.
When it comes to climate change, this isn't an acute issue. Depends what time frame you put it on. But this is something unfolding over years and multiple decades, as opposed to something that might be happening this week or this month. That is much more of an acute situation. So it kind of keeps pushing these climate issues off to the back burner. They stay on the stove, but they're pushed to the back burner. We're going to have to learn to address these issues. Something we might have gotten away with in the past because the summers were cooler, we're not going to get away with now.
It can be incredibly difficult to read the continued reports, to have an eye on these things, to watch the news and to know what we're facing if we don't proactively look at solutions in the short term and act on those swiftly. So it's encouraging, as somebody involved in that movement, involved in trying to bring our state forward, to see communities like ours rally together to try to solve these issues independently and in conjunction with the state.
I think people are responding to this in really constructive ways. So even though we have this fear that it'll continue to come back, I think that is kind of generated an urgency in people and has really brought out constructive and creative ideas to kind of confront this situation and figure out what we can do to stop it.
But I have a relatively positive vibe right now. That things are on the upswing in terms of the understanding and people being more interested in acting in both a mitigative sense and frankly coming to reality that we're going to have to adapt in some respects too.
You know, ultimately it all comes down to being a very human problem. You know, this affects us and our families and our businesses. And as long as we can regard this as a human problem and include each other at the table in finding solutions, I do think that we will find the right way forward.